So I think I watched The Social Network too many times in my sophomore year, not because I thought it was a particularly good movie. That accounted for maybe 2 or 3 times of it. But I wanted to do what Mark and Eduardo and even Sean did. And by that, I don't mean have the cocaine-infused parties with underage women that led to Sean's downfall at Facebook. No, I wanted to start something. I wanted to create something. If Wall Street in the 1980s led college students to want to be buyout kings, well, then The Social Network led me to want to be an entrepreneur. And so my sophomore year, I started a company called My Fresh Maine. As Jacob said, at our peak, we had over 15 vendors, 200 products, and thousands of dollars in revenue. And we connected farmers and consumers across the country. And it was a really great business to start. But this is the story of our rise, and then our fall, and then our rise, and then kind of our plateau / fall again. But before I continue, I want to mention that I'm 22, and I was an entrepreneur for just 2 years. So whatever life advice I have to offer, please take with a grain of salt. So when I wanted to start a business, I had 2 problems. The first was I didn't know how to start a business. And the second was I didn't know what to start. And I thought at the time that the latter was the more important issue. But as I came to learn later on, you can have a $1 billion business idea, but not know how to execute it, and then you'll have a $0 business. And so it's much more the former that's the more important. But I was naive, and I didn't know that at the time. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to start. And I got frustrated because it seemed like everything that I thought of had been done 10 years ago very well by someone famous. And Bill Gates has a saying that if you see a $10 bill lying on the ground, it's probably a figment of your imagination because someone already picked it up. And that kind of resonated with me because I felt like there was nothing that couldn't yet be created. But one night, I was laying sleepless in bed, and I don't know what was going on, but I thought of, maybe I just had a honey stick or something, or I went to the apple farm and picked an apple, and I said, why can't I get this in D.C., where I'm from? And so I called up a friend, and we both got really excited and said, okay, great, this is our $1 million idea. Before I go on, though, I also want to mention that as much as I love the environment, I am not an environmentalist. And as much as I love food, which you can see by my recent weight gain, I am not a foodie. And so the reason I started this business was not out of a passion for green enterprises or food. It was because I honestly thought this would be a great business. And as I'll talk about later, that sort of led to our downfall. So I'll skip forward a few months and talk about when we won $10,000. So we won, as Jacob mentioned, $10,000 in the Colby Spring Business Plan Competition. And when I went to pick up the check in the Student Financial Services office, I had never held so much money in my life. In fact, I was so excited that I called my partners, had them come over, and we took a picture and sent it to my parents, which is really embarrassing in retrospect, but I was really excited. We had $10,000, no contracts, no strings attached. Literally, we could do whatever we wanted with it. And so I got a little big-headed. And there were other competitions that were happening simultaneously, some statewide. And so I said, you know what? Our business is great. We'll enter them and we'll win. So the next competition was a Maine state competition for $5,000. And I was so blindly confident that I had already factored in at least $2,500 into our budget, even though we hadn't won yet. What I failed to realize is that we didn't have a business at that time. We had a shell of a website, a couple farmers who were interested, and what I thought was a cool idea, but it turns out 2 weeks after we sent in our application, I got a letter in the mail saying, I'm sorry, you didn't qualify for the interview because your idea is not sustainable and not practical. And so I said, okay, whatever. And so I entered another competition statewide, and we got the same response back. And it turns out that we were failing for the same reason that the Winklevoss twins failed to create Facebook. It's because we had this, what we thought was a really cool idea, but we had no way to execute it. And like I mentioned before, a business idea is only as good as the execution. If you think of going to space and that's going to be a great business, well, I hate to tell you, but that's really hard to do. So if you think of how to execute it, you may make $1 billion, but call me when you get there. And so we tried to figure out what was wrong. And we spent the next 6 months and worked our butts off. We didn't want to fail. We didn't want to be the Winklevoss twins in our social network story. And so 6 months after we started, we launched on Groupon. So in September of 2011, we launched on Groupon and sold over $2,000 on our first day. And that was really exciting for us, and things started to really pick up after that. We were on the 6 p.m. newscast of the local NBC station. We were interviewed for magazines. We were interviewed for newspapers. And it's funny because whenever we were interviewed for these publications, we were always asked, why did you start this business? What inspired you to do this? And they always wanted to hear, we're green, we love food, we love organic produce. In fact, the Entrepreneur magazine article, which has a readership of over 6 million people and was kind of the capstone of our success, was titled College Entrepreneurs Find a Green Niche. The truth of the matter is, though, we thought this would just make us a lot of money and be a really cool business to start. It had nothing to do with a passion. And so a year and a half after starting the business, we were doing really well. We were making thousands of dollars in revenue every month, but I was getting bored. And I was abroad at Oxford a year and a half after starting the business, and I much preferred to enjoy my life over there than focus on the business. I never once thought about dropping out of school to lead this business. I never once thought about even continuing on this business after I graduated. It was always something that I just thought was cool at the time. And that's sort of what led to our downfall. It wasn't that we were inept or had a business idea that couldn't be executed. It was that we got bored. And what I realized is that being an entrepreneur is not as sexy as people may seem to be. The Social Network, unfortunately, is a movie, and it's fictitious. And starting a business really isn't that sexy. And there are a lot of mundane activities that make the lows a lot lower and the highs not as high as they could be if it's your passion. And My Fresh Maine just wasn't the idea for me. It wasn't the right business for me, and it wasn't the right time for me to start a business. And to be an entrepreneur takes a lot of risk, and it takes a little bit of crazy. I mean, you always hear about the successful college dropouts, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs that started a business when they were 21, dropped out of college, and became billionaires overnight. But you don't hear about the 21-year-old that had this great idea, dropped out of college, and by the time he was 24, he was broke and had no college degree. Or you don't hear about the 28-year-old that quit his job, invested all his life savings in a business, and then it failed 2 years later and he was broke. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of risk, and like I said, a little bit of crazy. But what I realized is you have to do what you love, otherwise you're going to not do as well as possible. So it reminds me of a quote from a movie a while ago that's a guy learned he couldn't go to the Air Force Academy because he was colorblind, and he said, if I want to fly, I'll fly, do what you love, and expletive the rest. And I think the same holds true for being an entrepreneur in that you really have to do what you love, otherwise it's not going to be your best effort. Because, like I said, there are a lot of lows, and the lows feel a lot lower if it's not something you're excited about. And at the end of the day, you may get bored. So My Fresh Maine is not really in my life anymore, but I'm hoping that some Colby student will take it over in the future and maybe make it the million-dollar business that I couldn't. Maybe they'll drop out of school and do great. Maybe they'll drop out of school and fail. I have no idea. And whether I start a business again, I know now that unless I do something that I really like, which I have no idea what that is at this point, which is why I have no idea if I'm going to start a business again in my life, but unless I do something that I'm really passionate about, something that I really love, I know that it won't be worth the while because eventually I'll get bored and the lows won't feel as low. I mean, the lows will feel very low and the highs won't feel as high. And so, like I said, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about as an entrepreneur for 2 years, but that's my 2 cents. So thank you.